Lend me your ears.
This nation will rise up.
Welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. Welcome back to the Elemental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Quinton, and I'm delighted to have you back on for another episode. As always, I'm just blown away by each and every guest that I manage to make contact with, book in, and you know, sometimes it takes a while to get these things organised. But when we do record, I'm just completely blown away by the content and the insight that my guests are able to bring. And you know, every week it seems like I'm, you know, another level of kind of awareness and understanding and foray into health, happiness, longevity, neuroscience, all the things that I value and I think that are really, really important and are key to the message that I'm trying to put out in the world. And this week is absolutely no exception. In fact, if anything, we're stepping it up in terms of tactical, practical advice. This week I've got for you Professor Selena Bartlett. She is an addiction neuroscientist. Now, sounds pretty hardcore, and she's absolutely at the top of her game in terms of longevity in the field and being in the game for a long time and understanding what it means to be healthy and specifically how the neuroscience in our brains works and stops us from achieving the health and happiness that we want and those hardwired pathways that hold us back from doing everything we want to do in life, and she's actually putting a lot of work into how we can unpick those and some habits, and we get into the habits and the actions and the tools and tactics that you guys can take to actually unwire that hard wiring that's limiting you, keeping you addicted to the things that you shouldn't be addicted to and holding you back in your life, and some unhealthy habits and all those components that sort of held us back and subconsciously and even consciously to actually achieving what we want to achieve and continuing along the path we want to achieve. It's really, really interesting, and it's a short one, and we're straight in with the nitty gritty of how you can actually take this on board and action it from pretty much from the get-go. It's pretty fast-paced, so hold on to your seats for this installment of the Elemental Health Podcast. Please welcome the amazing Selena Bartlett. Selena Bartlett, welcome to the Elemental Health Podcast. It's fantastic to connect with you and have this conversation. I know we've had a little bit of problem scheduling, but I'm really glad I've got you, and I'm very keen to jump in and sort of unpick what you've been up to and the area that you're specialising in and the MIGFIT company that you've launched and the really, really fascinating work that's going on with that. I came across you on another podcast, a friend of mine, Jeremy, on his Through the Wire podcast. It's really interesting, the work that you're in and the space that you're in. And there's obviously a massive synergy to the movement that I'm trying to put my energy behind and my voice behind. So welcome. Let's start with kind of a very quick understanding of what you're up to now, what you're focusing on, and why that's important to you, why that's become a priority and a passion.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm really, really grateful. I'm pretty excited to be talking to you from Australia while you're over there in London. I was actually just in London and had the best New Year's Eve ever. So you do know how to celebrate New Year, just telling you. Nice. Anyway, so I'm Professor Selena Bartlett. I run a research lab, and I'm an addiction neuroscientist, and I've been studying the brain for 30 years. I started studying the brain because my sister got a mental illness. I didn't like how she was treated. So I spent quite a lot of time with my pharmacist, medically trained hat on, developing medications, thinking that was the solution. And during that process, while I was running a research lab at University of California, San Francisco for 12 years, I kind of stumbled across this term neuroplasticity, which is the concept where your brain has this massive capacity to change forever. And I actually honestly believe, and I'm sure this is why you're doing the podcast, that this is a revolution, and it's been underway for probably a century at least. But as neuroscientists, we did a pretty poor job at translating this capacity of the brain to change. People have read books like The Brain That Changes Itself and all of these other concepts and terms. And sometimes what I discovered was people kind of thought this was related to recovering from stroke or learning difficulties or hearing loss or, all of these big deals. But what I thought and did for myself and see for others is this is something you can do to your own lives. Basically, unless you're tapping into your brain's massive capacity for change, then it gets stuck and it actually goes backwards. So even though you could feel really comfortable with no change, what actually you are actually going backwards. So, and this is all totally to do with the brain and how it works. So my latest passion is really to show people, so I run a lab that shows how sugar, for example, and alcohol actually change the physical structure of the brain. And then the massive capacity the brain has to rewire those things that have been built into our brain for generations and centuries. And the biggest deal, which is why I'm on your podcast, started my own podcast, write books for a general audience, is that I don't think many people understand how their brain works. And it's basically because you can't see it. Whereas when you're doing your workouts in the gym and taking your protein shakes, you're watching those muscles build up and become strong. So you're getting great feedback and you don't really care too much except to see that it's growing. Whereas with the brain, how do I show you your brain's changing with all of these great habits you're building around food and exercise and connecting with people and these wonderful positive things that influence your brain? I can't really show it to you very effectively. So I've kind of become really enamored with this idea that we need to change the educational platform and the way we deliver knowledge to people about the strength and resilience of the brain. I feel like it's been taken over by a lot of people that have never studied the brain. And furthermore, just everything we now understand around the brain, because we can actually see it with brain imaging technology, is the brain just has this absolutely massive capacity for change.
Wow. Okay. Wow. It's a real honor, and it's amazing for me to chat to someone who's got such a depth of knowledge in such a specific area that's so fascinating to me and so pertinent to everything that I do with my coaching and just everyone in life, really, because I think people think that you can kind of make a decision to do something completely different, and then it will just be, once you start doing it, it will just be easy. But obviously,
no.
people don't really understand that change is really hard, and there's a massive challenge to making change. And I know that you've studied kind of obesity and stress and sugar and all the bits you commented on,
addiction specifically.
Yeah.
So and why I say that and what you're trying to allude to, why is this so hard? Like, you get really excited day one, but by day 5 you're back to drinking, you're back to having that big hamburger with the beer, and you stop going to the gym, right? So why is it? Why has that happened to everyone, and even with coaching? And so from a brain perspective, every single brain is wired completely different. And just to step back a little bit on the knowledge side, we actually came from stardust, and then bacteria, and then mushrooms, and then plants, etc. And why do I tell you that? It's because the same wiring that exists in those very primitive structures, even down to one cell, we use the same kind of apparatus in our brain and our body to survive. So our main goal as humans is to survive, right? But we think we're really intelligent. But there's a lot of the circuitry that's hardwired into the brain where when you get stressed out, that circuitry is activated and keeps us stuck. So even though you have a great intention, tomorrow's the day, I wake up, I do my gratitude, I do my exercise, I'm going to eat the best food. By the end of the day, you've got the employees coming to you saying, where's my pay? You're in a job you can't stand. You're in a relationship that you shouldn't be in. By the end of the day, all of those things have subliminally, subconsciously, it is subconscious because it's so old in the brain. It's already triggered you to go and grab the donut, go and grab the beer at the end of the day, because no one's actively training their brain during the day. No one's even been shown how to train their brain.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how many of your friends talk to you about the brain training they're doing every day. I'm sure you hear a lot about their number of reps, the protein shakes, the walks, the runs, the jogs, the triathlons, the ultramarathons. There's counsellors, the psychologists, the medications, the alcohol. You'll hear all of that, but you will not hear anyone talking about their brain training.
So how do we start? What's the key to it, and how's that linked to the work that you're doing now?
Okay, so the first question I always ask anybody when I give a talk is, so how did you wake up this morning? How did you feel when you woke up? Were you waiting for the day to start? Were you thinking you had the best possible life that exists on this planet? Or was it more like, oh, God, I want to go back to sleep. Oh, I've got to go and face my boss. Oh, I can't be bothered going to the gym today because I had a big night last night. Was that more the case? So more or less 90% of people always say to me, it's the second, not the first. They don't wake up and think, oh my God, I'm 1 in a trillion chance of being alive. Look at the sunrise. Oh my God, I can't wait to get going today. We are so lucky to be alive. Even regardless of all the stuff you hear in the press, which really drives the negative aspects of the way the brain processes information, which I really, really get upset about. And I'll tell you why that is. So the minute you wake up, your brain is a machine. It's always going to be deriving the information you're giving it. So if you're giving information that's really negative in that sense, you can call it negative, whatever you like, it's going to drive and seek the information to support and give you evidence to support that thinking. So to actively change right in the very beginning is just, you really have to change the way you wake up in the morning, because the brain's a machine. It's going to go and spend the rest of the day building evidence to support your thinking. And why is that? Why is that? Because that part of the brain that I just told you about that came from bacteria and mushrooms basically drives the brain for survival, because the survival apparatus is the most critical part of being a human. We have to survive. But now we're in this modern, plentiful world where we're not ploughing the fields or we're not looking for snakes. It's still operating in the same way because no one's retrained their brain to say, hey, we're in the Western world, we don't need to think like that anymore. And so the other part so there's two aspects in this part of the brain. That's the stress, fear, anxiety induced wiring. And it's highly, highly wired to this other part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is the reward-seeking part of the brain. That's where you're driving for dopamine, serotonin. And because the brain doesn't want you to kill it by all the stress and no training, it drives you to seek dopamine, which comes very rapidly from alcohol, from high-fat food, from sugar, from gambling, from over-exercising, or from lashing out. That is a way of counteracting stress-induced cortisol and noradrenaline from killing off the brain. I know it sounds really basic, but we are just a physical biochemical structure in there too. We do have mind, spirit, and all the rest, but there is a physical part of the brain, just like when you're pumping weights for your arm. There is a physical part of the brain that requires training, just like you train your biceps. Mm-hmm. And this doesn't mean that I'm saying that's all there is. I'm not saying that at all. Not at all. I'm just saying that there is this one element that requires rewiring and retraining in our modern world, and we now have enough neuroscience, neuroimaging, and other things to support demonstrating that this is really important. Because what I find is there's been a vacuum in this space, and so a lot of people have stepped in with a lot of complicated stuff because we want to think that we're smarter than just biochemistry, right? Mm-hmm. And that piece of this piece is missing, in my view, from the conversations. Yeah. And so I want to bring them in and say, hey guys, I know this isn't very sexy, but it is reality.
Well, it goes hand in hand with any kind of health approach. You know, everyone's looking for the really shiny, sexy, complicated tactics, aren't they? But it starts with the basics. It starts with real basics, whether it's nutrition, whether it's exercise. Yeah.
There's nutrition and exercise is very important, the building blocks, but understanding how your brain works is even more essential. Yeah. And it's like, and why do I say that? Well, I haven't talked to you about how and why your brain is harder, why your brain's different to my brain and your friend's brain, and that's because of adverse childhood experiences. We now know that we inherit over many decades and centuries, but going back 5 centuries, adverse childhood experiences or negative memories that have been wired into our brain, right? And it's not just your genetic blueprint. It's not epigenetics that are changing the way your genes are expressed. These are the non-coding RNAs that we're just now discovering, carrying memories. So if you want to go back and look at your trauma and say, oh, it's because of this I'm stuck, or this happened and that's why I eat, or I'm fat because of Uncle X, or whatever, yes, possibly true, but you'll never find out all of it, ever. We'll never know which mushroom you got your action potential from, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, so it's not just my life experience, it's everything
No.
that's before that.
Well, tell me your great-great-grandfather's trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, well, you've got a little bit of it in there somewhere, but God knows what it is. So you're going to spend the rest of this one precious 1 in a trillion chance of your life finding it out? No, it's not worth it. But the thing that we do know that I'm really excited about, and why I came out of my lab to talk about this, is because neuroplasticity demonstrates that you can change the future. And you don't have to be living with all of that from the past, because neuroplasticity allows you to retrain, rechange some of these synaptic connections in your brain to lead to something better. I like to say it's, using neuroplasticity to drive happy, healthy, strong. And don't you want to be happy, healthy, strong? Yes, because it's much more fun. In my experience so far, since I started doing it, because I wasn't always like this. My brain was completely untrained and really wildly crazy, worrying about everything, and negative. I got really overweight. I was really unhealthy, and I was really sad. Mm-hmm. So I've seen that side of the equation, and now I've seen the other side, and I'm like, I don't know which side I'm working on.
Absolutely. But it is having the understanding at an intellectual level, and as you're starting to do, and I want to get onto that, is kind of bring it down to implementation and taking that knowledge, because I think that's a massive factor as well. Everyone kind of wants the knowledge and the understanding and the deeper understanding, but then actually taking action, there's a massive divide there, and that's why my approach is always to try and make things as simple and as kind of as visceral as possible, so people can actually take action and against them.
So what I say straight away, immediately, you can get the knowledge as you start the implementation, but the knowledge is critical, because unless you understand, you don't know how your brain works, and it does require training. How do we change anything? Anyway, so the first step is right now for your audience is just to do one little biohack to demonstrate the power that you have inside you to make these changes, right? So immediately, Nick, push your shoulders back, because your hands are in front of you. Push your shoulders back, put your arms on your hips. And I'd like you to, like your shoulders right back. They're a little bit, I need them further up, so you're standing like a rectangle in a way, like really strong and powerful, like a big dominant gorilla in the jungle, as you are.
Yeah,
as we all are, or as we want to be, and we're not. And so when you do that, now you take a really deep breath. What you're doing is creating a biohack, and you're actually immediately starting to calm down the animal part of the brain. Immediately, right? So how is that? Why is that? It's because the way that deep breath, the shoulders back, immediately there's a connection between the oldest amygdala, nucleus accumbens part of your brain, and the brain stem, which regulates your breathing. So immediately you've recreated a new way of just standing that is biohacking your brain. Now, why do you need to do that? Because unless you're doing that, you're never going to have enough dopamine, or you're never going to have enough reduction in cortisol that allows you to maintain your motivation. So that's just one little biohack. Like even just scanning your body posture all day brings about a great change in your life. And that it's too simple, isn't it? We don't want simple. We want freaking complicated, wearing belts and buying $4,000 pieces of equipment and getting hundreds of coaches. And, we don't want to just recognize that we can do our own body scan and take back the brain power we have inside. So I'm really into empowering people to empower themselves, because that's how we lead to long-term change. So that's one biohack. The second big one is how you wake up in the morning. It's critical. So as soon as you wake and you're lying in bed, just think of 3 things you're grateful for. immediately. And that in itself takes your brain from just ruminating on itself and all your problems to thinking about something outside yourself. And those two little biohack changes are something that can drive change immediately. It's really quite astounding to see these changes inside people. Okay, so now if you're coming from multiple hundreds of centuries of trauma, difficulties, and I work with people in foster care and youth justice and, Indigenous, etc., that have had years of trauma, centuries of trauma. So what's happening in that case is that oldest part of the brain is now shutting down the synaptic connections in the prefrontal cortex. Now, in that top rational part of the brain is where working memory sits, and that's where impulse control sits. So we have to start doing actually neuroplasticity-based cognitive brain training programs to help rebuild those synaptic connections that have been lost from trauma and stress. And when you do that, I have podcasts and stuff about that, but it's kind of in the internet if you look around. By improving working memory and cognition, you're actually improving your impulse control. What do I mean by that? Well, that stops you taking the second donut, right? But if those connections in the top of the brain are disconnected, like a pipe not connected properly, you just can't do it. You really can't,
So just, so much information, so much gold there. I'm just trying to process it all. And so what we're saying is that the kind of fear-based primal brain, lower brain function needs to be overridden every single morning. So you're able to develop your higher brain function and therefore evolve.
Yes. So can I just add 2 points why that is?
Yep.
So as I said to you, these are physical connections, neural circuitry in the brain. What's the number one job of the brain is to keep alive. So what's it going to do? It's going to process negative, fearful, anxiety-ridden information, whether it's sight, sound, smells, anything in the environment at 10x the rate over positive. Right? Because it has to, because that's what it's been tuned to do over centuries and millions of years of evolution. So when I say this gratitude, these biohacks, why I'm saying that is because we have to physically and consciously drive in these other things to counteract what's natural to the alert brain, right? We're reconditioning the brain for positivity because, as you know, I'm sure you know, in a circle of friends, there are just some people that are just wired for negativity.
Yeah, and I see that way. And I see that, coming from a clinical setting, I see that in patients as well, that have got chronic illnesses, and the mindset is kind of leading the way in so many so many patients, and such a massive cohort. I don't want to say it's 100%, but lots of patients
I don't know what you think, Nick, but I see mindset. I see people making themselves sick, and they're not meaning to. It's not intentional. It's just that they feel like it's a relief to have a label in a way. Because then it's like using the word hope. I hope to change. Well, that just takes out all responsibility from yourself, doesn't it? To drive the change.
Absolutely. And it's that's the biggest battle, I think, that people and the system. So that's what I'd like to sort of touch on as well, without getting too politicized, is obviously the system, we're pushing against a tide into what we're trying to create here, and these messages that we're trying to put out into the world, because the system, the sick care, as I call it, system is kind of creating that patient archetype, and that the relationships are very broken. So how do we push against that tide?
Well, this is where, I just want to put out there that without modern medicine, we'd all be dead, because in the past we'd all be, we didn't live very long. Okay, so I believe in modern medicine where modern medicine is needed for sure. I just don't believe that. But I believe in a holistic approach where you integrate, and there's a middle way between what we're talking about and modern medicine and everything that works for different people, because we are trying to upend millions of years of evolution, right? Yeah. So I just believe that with modern technology, like these podcasts, the capacity of people to get information, you and I would never have connected before, right?
True, very true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're getting information from people that would never have got this information before. And I'm telling you, I've listened to 1,000 podcasts, and it's changed my life too, because some of those messages become subliminal. And then before you know it, you're saying things like, I'll give you an example. I do triathlon occasionally. I'm in it for the fun because I like to have the challenge. And I used to be, halfway down the mob in my age group. I just got number one. And you know what the difference was? I hadn't been on my bike for 4 years, right? So it's not the training. It was what I was saying during that because I've been doing Wim Hof, and I've been doing all these other David Goggins and all these crazy people. I've been doing all of that. And I changed my mindset during the races to, this is easy. I've got 40% more capacity.
Yeah.
I'm not joking, Nick. I did all
That's
of
awesome.
that. And I became, I'm 54. I was number one in my age category, which was 50 to 54. And this has never happened to me in my life. And I hadn't been on a bike for 4 years.
Amazing.
I'm not
amazing.
joking. But I have run. I do run. I have huge baseline fitness. So don't get me wrong. It's not about the mindset. I have fitness. But I'm just saying to you that the biggest difference that I know from that particular race was what I was saying to myself the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using that big breathing technique of Wim Hof, and because I did the 10-week course, and because I want to practice and try it. I'm just telling you that we're so untapped, it's not funny.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's giving people the impetus and the confidence really to explore, isn't it? Really, I think that's a big part of it, and letting them allow themselves. Yeah,
you're so, Nick, because each of us is so different. We've got different wiring. We've got different things that have happened to us over time, and some things resonate with some and not others. And so having that ability to experiment and be curious with yourself and just try one little thing, and that's what anyone can do. Gratitude when they wake up. Anyone.
Yeah, and giving themselves permission as well. I think that's a big first step, isn't it, to kind of unlocking all this stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I like these podcasts. I like generating novel ways of getting these concepts across, and I do, Nick, believe that knowledge and education raises all boats. And I really believe unless we use different channels of talking about this in different ways, that each time I do one of these things, one thing I said resonates with one person, and that's okay. That's okay. We don't have to do 1 million at a time. One at a time is fine. Do you know what I mean? If it can make their life a little bit better, or their husbands or their children or their partner or people that they're working with. And I've seen word of mouth big time. And you and I don't even know who we're touching most of the time. That's what I realized too. Yeah. And so you just keep going, and we just have to keep going,
It really is a powerful era that we live in. And you're absolutely right. I've had some incredible conversations with people like yourself that I would never have connected with. And it's completely shifted my perspective on this journey and promoting that to get my message out there and creating that platform. And it's just, it's truly astounding age that we live in. And that's kind of gives me confidence when I think back to clinical practice and kind of the tide, as I see it, of kind of the sick care and trying to put a dent in that. But absolutely. So what's the link to the MIGFIT stuff that you're doing, and that they're trying to create something that allows more people to do what you're talking about? Yeah,
I think feedback's really important, and people still want to look and feel good. And so the reason I founded MIGFIT is because I did this for myself, and I feel fantastic. I've never felt this fit in my whole life, and I thought that if MIGFIT's all about training your brain to lose weight.
Right.
And also to manage stress, because stress is kind of the number one thing that drives being overweight, because there's 3 things that happen. It's what you end up going to without being even consciously aware of when you're stressed, which is high fat food and sugar. And why is this a big deal? Well, there's 3 things I just want to talk to about that. in the case of sugar, my lab showed that sugar changes the brain the same way that alcohol and nicotine do. It's as addictive as alcohol and nicotine and binds nicotinic receptors, which are the ones that nicotine binds to in the brain. So the other thing sugar does, it's the fructose part of sugar. It actually binds to the hypothalamus, and you never feel full after eating your next meal. So when we have one chocolate bar that might look like it's 100 calories, inside your body it's more like 1,000 calories, because of the way it changes the structure of your body. So what do I mean by that? Because fructose contains so much energy, the body doesn't like it. So it forms these visceral fat cells, and they're in your stomach and your thighs, and those little cells multiply like gas chamber, like cancer cells, and they expand. And that's where you get, bigger waist or bigger thighs, for example. And the reason I like this is because when you start to see that your mindset and brain training can actually reduce your waistline, you've got instant feedback. So we've been doing clinical trials. We've built an app to help people track their sugar intake, because people have no concept about that, but it's such an easy thing to start with, like to work out just how much. You're meant to only have 9 teaspoons a day, but most people are having like 60, for example.
Yeah.
I know, but it's these
crazy.
little things that you just have no idea about. I didn't know until my lab did this work, and I was training for marathons, not losing my stomach from having children. And then I got my waistline back from reducing sugar. And I also got my appetite back. So I used to eat a lot and never feel full. But as soon as I started to reduce my sugar intake, I could get full from eating again. How crazy is that? And it was all driven by stress, because I was running a huge lab, raising children during my 30s and 40s. And I got really ill, really sick, really unhappy and really unhealthy. And where it all started from was brain training, my mindset, and then reducing sugar intake and exercising. But the mindset matters a lot.
Yeah, and to reiterate, again, what you're saying is when you say mindset, what you're saying is, and stress is what you need to do is you need to combat what's going on down in the bottom of your brain.
Yes,
and slow everything down physiologically to allow you to relax and that hard breath to take over. So one thing that I coach on or did for myself is, I would normally come home after a big day, no brain training, and grab a bottle of wine to cook dinner with. And that bottle would go to, one glass would go to half a bottle pretty quickly. This is when I had the kids and getting dinner on the table, bathing, all of that. And then, so what I do now is instead of going home to do that immediately, which is an old habit, I'd go outside just for 5 minutes instead. Mm-hmm. So you're just retraining some of those habits around what you're grabbing when you're stressed. The other thing I do is now I do brain training. Like as soon as I wake up in the morning, I have a very strong, wicked morning routine, which involves gratitude, exercising. I immediately now, just out of habit, put on my exercise clothes straight away. I never used to, and then that would lead me to, wait till after work. And then as soon as you're making those decisions, forget about exercise. Also eating well, like some evidence for like intermittent fasting or fruit till noon, for example. Though not eat, like we have to reduce our amount we eat because we eat way too much. They're little things, but they all add up to something great, and it just takes time. And you can just work on one thing at a time out of those things. But can you see immediately it's setting the intention to recognize that you're rewiring your stress pathway in your amygdala to do that? Because stress is subconsciously, everything you do is wiring your brain, and stress wires it at 10x the rate over pleasure and happiness. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? But as soon as you wake up and you don't make a decision to go exercising or whatever, but you're immediately looking at your email or the news or any of those things, forget it. You're done for the day. Yeah.
You're going to be going to the... Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it is. No, I mean, it is counterintuitive, but we see it everywhere, don't we? We see that kind of that negativity and the stress in people's eyes.
I call it being addicted to your suffering, and it's not your fault. it's the brain's fault, but that's how it works, you know.
Yeah, and yeah. I know we've got a hard stop here, so I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of let people know where they can hear about you and your podcast and all the find more details, and just thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And it's just, I mean, it's so much in the last 30 minutes that I'd love to unpick, and the kind of that neuro memory going back generations and hundreds of generations.
Yes.
As well, was fascinating to me.
I'm happy to come on and talk about that because it's my passion, and I think really think this is the key to the revolution underway, is the science behind the understanding that it's not epigenetics only or genetics. It's actually non-coding RNAs, what we used to call junk DNA, that is holding. And it's about diet-induced obesity coming from the male sperm. Even in utero, like before you even have kids, like you need to prepare your body for having children, because the kids are inheriting these memories from previous generations. And it's the little things we can, so that's what I love about neuroplasticity. We're not just changing ourselves, we're changing the future and the future generations too. It's not just about you, baby. It's like and with mirror neurons, you're actually changing the people around you too as you make these changes, because they start copying you, right? Have you seen that? Like people, as soon as you're with someone, a partner or someone you love, they start copying you because of mirror neurons. So there's all of this knowledge that we're kind of gaining. And I really, really believe education is such a massive step to change. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. You're blowing my mind. Where can they find out and listen a bit more to your...
So I have a podcast now, which I haven't contributed for a few weeks, but I'm going to start again. It's called Shining Mind, SHINING. It's on everywhere, Apple, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, etc. They can Google my name, which is Selena Bartlett, SELENA, Bartlett, BARTLETT. And I have a book called Smashing Mindset, which is on Amazon, and another one called Mickey Matters. And I also have written tons of scientific papers if people want to reach out to see my science. But I've studied the brain as a neuroscientist around the world for 30 years. And it all came from a place of me trying to change the way my sister was treated, who died from schizophrenia, and I didn't like how she was treated. So I've been studying the brain ever since, which is since that happened in 1989. So I was actually a pharmacist developing drugs.
Right.
So yeah, and I was medically trained. I've worked at UCSF, so I've seen everything. I understand how everything works. I work with drug companies and everything, but I honestly believe after everything I've seen that neuroplasticity is the next best. I mean, we're going to learn a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more things coming with neurofeedback and brain stimulation and machine learning and big data and apps and technology that are going to help. But I'm telling you now, the brain can be changed and rewired from this, and we're upending evolution when we do that. So why we're struggling, Nick, to get this message out, and it can be frustrating because I'm about 4 or 5 years in now. It's just because we are changing something quite dramatically in terms of the way evolution's going to head. Like, you're either going to be with this or you're just going to go down with the mushroom brain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can talk about psychedelics too.
There's so much going on. I mean, yeah. Selena, it's been amazing. Thank really
you,
has.
And anytime, just invite me on. I'm happy to talk about.
I'm gonna have to pin you down for another episode. I really do want to do that.
Another thing is good if your audience writes in and says what they would like to learn about, and we can just focus just on that topic. That's sometimes really good too. I've got a lot of feedback from a different podcast I did in America called Hope to Recharge. Her whole focus is depression and anxiety. And obviously I have a lot of background in that. And people really liked hearing about the hope of neuroplasticity around driving yourself to eat healthy, exercise, and overcome depression and anxiety too, which holds people back. You know, I think that's a big deal too.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up. And Selena, thank you very much. And you know, my thoughts and prayers are with your nation at the moment as well, in a really difficult time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Best of luck, and I will.
We are a resilient lot over here, as you know.
I know. Cool, awesome. Thank you very much, Selena.
Thanks, Nick.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, take care. Thank you for your time. There you go, the amazing Professor Selena Bartlett. Let me know what you thought of that one. I really do feel that's probably the most we've jam-packed into 35 minutes of conversation on the whole of the podcast series to date, 25, 26 episodes, wherever we're up to now. But impressive. Loads of advice there, guys, and we cover so much, so you might want to kind of go back through, and I'll try and update the show notes as well, and give you some links through to the bits and pieces that are going on, how you can connect with Selena, and how you can delve a bit more into what we talked about today. As always, guys, your support is highly valued, and I truly appreciate it. So thank you very much for listening. Please go over to your app that you listen to and rate and review us, whether that's iTunes or whatever you're listening to us on. Also connect on social media, and please provide us some feedback so we know how we're doing, who you want to hear from, who you want me to connect with and get on the show, and how we can progress. Your feedback is highly valued. Guys, I'm Nick Quinton. You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want. It's at The Knock, THENOQ, and I will see you on the next episode.
absolutely